Good morning, everyone. I'm Sally Durstein, and I'd like to welcome each of you to our learning community, whether you've been learning with us for 30 years or this is the first time, and whether you're here in real time or if you're tuning in at your own convenience. I'm grateful for each of you and how you contribute as we share a common vision of flourishing in our families and our businesses. I believe that each day is an opportunity to learn and do the next right thing, and also unlearn what we saw modeled that won't take us where we want to go, or maybe isn't consistent with our values. Well, today we are going to learn about the advisor mountain. We focused on the other mountains earlier this year, the family, the shareholder, management, and board mountains. And like other programs, we think the best way to learn is from those who walk the walk, as well as those who guided them. So today we're going to learn from a member family who is building their advisory team, I would say, exceptionally well. Well, there are 4 things I'd like you to know before we get started. We do welcome questions. You can click on the Q&A button and type in a question. We have lots of content today, so we'll likely reserve any questions until the end. And if we don't get to questions or to your question, you are welcome to reach out to me, to Henry, to Karen, to Robbie at any point. We're here to help. And if you have technical issues, be free to reach out to Karen Berge. The information is on the slide here. And lastly, members, you will have access to the video and to the slides in the next day or 2 on our website, as well as past programs. So many of you are familiar with our 5-mountain process. This model depicts your work and our work as guides to help you flourish. Well, enterprising families who are successful now and over the generations continually work to develop these 5 mountains. Now, it's challenging, as you know, because in a family business, in your business, many times you're in multiple roles, multiple mountains at the same time. And you have to figure out what are your roles and responsibilities, where you are in this meeting at this time, and what everybody else's is, and then stay accountable. So we help you chart those paths up the mountains, teach principles, develop leaders, and help to guide the process. Part of our role as a family business advisor is to help the whole system grow. That's all these mountains. And this includes helping family businesses evaluate their current advisors, identify the gaps, and recruit and select advisors who can help them get where they want to go. So as we go through this forum, I want you to consider what advisors you might need to help your family and business fly higher. Now, there are lots of resources and advisors out there, but you deserve the best. So we help you evaluate current ones, identify needs, and here are some listed that we think some are every family business should have, like family business advisor. Everyone needs an accountant. Now you want those that are looking forward, not in their rear view mirror. Certified financial planner. It's important to know where you are personally, financially, for both generations. Attorneys, estate planning attorneys, business attorneys, they help to mitigate risk. We sometimes call them defense coordinators, and they also help with legal documents. HR specialists, since compensation is such a hot lightning rod issue, they're often helpful. We often recommend leadership assessments for non-family members coming in, for family members coming in, and as we prepare. Marriage counselors, family business is tough on marriages. Loan officers, pastors, spiritual directors, M&A advisors, addiction counselors. Every family kind of has their own addiction of choice, I would say. Today, you'll even hear about a neuropsychologist, and there's others. But what might your family need now or in the future? Well, we think family businesses need and deserve not just experienced advisors, but also those who can collaborate. Because we're talking about business planning, there's shareholder issues, family issues, and often a team can help you avoid unintended consequences. So we think family businesses deserve advisors who understand your whole 5-mountain complexity because you don't know what you don't know. Now, I believe we're pretty good at helping business families do their strategic planning in and across the mountains, but we don't do this alone. We know our capabilities and our limitations. And this is a principle I just believe so wholeheartedly in. And that is, none of us is as smart as all of us. This is consistent with our theme book, The Ideal Team Player, where it's important to be hungry, humble, and smart. You want advisors who can team together, not be in silos. And just a few other comments. We've worked with lots and lots of advisors over the past 30 years. And as we help you identify what you need, sometimes these are the same advisors you learn alongside of in our forums. And these are our EDU or educational sponsors. And they really demonstrate their commitment to learning, their competence as they present their thought leadership in programs, and also their ability to play as a team member. In my experience, some family businesses are very interested in investing in buildings and machinery. But one of the things that we help our clients do is think about the advice they need and invest more in intellectual capital. Like, should we really be building the building? Should we be making that acquisition? Or should we be developing our people or investing in other things that might get us where we want to go? And lastly, a special word to rising generation leaders. One of your tasks is to evaluate the advisors to assure that they are your advisors. When I became the majority partner of our sender here, one of the first things that I did was to select a new accountant. Now, there was nothing wrong with Henry's accountant, but I wanted someone that fit my style better and who was closer to my age. Fill in later. But now I'd like to give you the opportunity to hear firsthand experiences from family shareholders whom I believe have identified, selected, and are using advisors extremely well across their mountains. Well, I'm delighted that Karen and Robbie have accepted my invitation. These are two leaders whom Henry and I have had the privilege to work with the last, I think, 6 years, and whom I deeply respect for their character and their stewardship mindset. Many of you know Karen and Robbie. They've been participating in forums the last 5 years. They even came during our 30th celebration snowstorm that some others of you did not make. And they presented on their family council a number of years ago. Eric also presented from their family. So they've done the deep work on all the mountains. And so maybe one more comment here. Here are members of the Keim family. This is a remarkable family. This is a picture of them actually in their foyer of their retail store in Ohio. This fourth generation family has navigated extraordinary challenges, crises, and trauma. And yes, they are still standing. They're resilient. So these extreme complexities that they have faced may have blown up the family and sunk the business. Now, while not perfect and still in process, I am grateful that Robbie and Karen are willing to share elements of their story as they want to give hope and help to other family businesses. So while they could talk for hours about each of their mountains, I've asked them to primarily focus on the advisor mountain. We know it takes a village to raise children. Well, it takes a village of advisors to surround family businesses with support and guidance through the generations. So Karen is a spouse. Spouses play a key role in family businesses, and that's why we call them a first-round draft pick. Karen grew up in Pennsylvania. She played shortstop on the boys' team and led church meetings as a teenager. So you get the picture a little bit of Karen. So before we get into the context of the Keim story, I'd like to invite Karen to share why and how she reached out to us from her home in Ohio. Welcome, Karen.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for having us today, Sally. I look forward to sharing with you. And yes, we're open to questions or things if you need to reach out afterwards. I just want to have a little disclaimer at the beginning. You know, we all experience our family business journey differently, and just want to recognize that each family member has a unique perspective. And so today we're sharing ours on our journey. Like Sally said, I'm Karen Keim, and I am a first round draft pick, a spouse of G4 shareholder Robbie Keim. And I learned to know Robbie well enough while we were dating that when I said yes to his wedding proposal or his marriage proposal, I knew that I was not just committing to being married to him for life, but I was also committing to life in Ohio and to the family business. So in 2014, when my father-in-law died, and grief and confusion and misunderstanding and conflict kind of started surfacing in the family from his absence, I began to wonder, well, what resources are out there to help us through this? So I set out to find out. So I did what maybe many of you do, or what I often do as a starting point. I just did a Google search. And through that, I started reading books on family business. Robbie and I started talking to other family business leaders in our area. Eventually, we planned a family meeting to meet with the existing accountant and lawyer to just understand, okay, and to help everybody else in the family understand like what is set up, and like to just kind of make sure everybody had kind of the same place to start from. We even, in running into some different tension points, we ended up trying some mediation at a local counseling center. I eventually bought a family business curriculum that I thought, well, we'll try and walk through this with the family with some good material. But clearly that wasn't going to be an option. We never used that curriculum. The tensions just kept mounting. So instead I went down a path of searching for the family business consultants. And that is where we kind of looked into. I found about 4 to 6 different options that eventually narrowed down to 2, and that was Delaware Valley and another firm in the western part of the country. And we narrowed it down to Delaware Valley after some phone calls and reference checks and things. And really what it came down to is that a couple of things. They were referred by a friend, and they had lots of years of experience. They had worked with a similar business in our area, and they had somewhat of an understanding of our culture, that the context in which we are in an Amish Mennonite community. And most important for us, they also had a faith component. And Robbie and I knew that that would be a really key piece for ourselves as well as the rest of the family. So it was in that process, it was a process. That search took about 1.5 years after my father-in-law passed away, until Henry and Sally actually came to Ohio and did what I think they called base camp. They met with every one of our upper level managers. They met with all of our advisors, which at that point was just an accountant and a lawyer. And they met with each individual family member separately or as couples. And then they did some family business education in a meeting. And it was so interesting because it just started to normalize the confusion and the complexity and the tension that we were experiencing that we didn't know was normal. So that's kind of how we got to working with Henry and Sally.
Well, Robbie, welcome to you. You're looking good this morning.
Thanks.
So
Good morning, everyone.
You are a 4th generation shareholder. We have others on the call here. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with the business as a youngster and perhaps through early childhood, and maybe a little bit about your family of origin and the tragic loss that your family faced when you were a teenager.
Yeah. Sure. So, I say good morning, everyone. Happy to be here, and I'm not used to speaking to a screen when there's 30 or 40 people watching me. So, so give me some grace, please. So I was the oldest son of Bill, Bill and Carolyn, and I had 3 younger sisters. My next younger sister was 4 years younger than I, and she was developmentally disabled. Then my next youngest sister was 9 or 10 years younger than me, and then my youngest sister was 15 years younger than me. So there was quite a spread of age gap there. so in some ways, when you look at that, I grew up as an only child in some relational ways. When I was 4, when I was around the age of 4, somewhere in there, I started struggling with stuttering, which continued into adulthood, and we'll touch on that more about a little bit later. My mom had chronic ulcerative colitis when her whole my whole life, and with the business, interacting with the business was always around. It was just a part of a normal part of life. Like as a toddler, I would ride my tricycle around a retail store, like leaving skid marks on the store floor while there were customers walking around, to the consternation of the store manager, who still works here actually. While my parents paid the bills some evenings. Through grade school, middle school, high school, I did a variety of like office work, writing checks out here and there. So it was just sort of a part of what I did. And yeah, going to banquets and picnics, and whenever there was a store event, a company event, I was there. It was just big family. Like I said, even to the point, it was just such a normal part of life. Like I was born in 1975, and our first retail store would have opened in 74. So I was there like the whole time. And even to the point of growing up in the company, sort of, there were still several employees here who can say they changed my diapers. So that's a funny fact. I used to sign their paychecks too. So that was sort of a funny thing there. Anyways, so looking back on all that, with the perspective now, and with Henry and Sally, is looking back on things, the business was sort of like an older sibling, as far as, Dad, like a lot of the family's attention was on the business and stuff. And there's a whole trail you could go down with that, but it's an interesting perspective for me. As far as me working in the business, like I would have started working some days in high school when I was 14, I was a freshman. Then I started working full time straight out of high school. When I was a senior in high school, my mom would have died from cancer that stemmed from her colitis that she had since she was a teenager. Dad remarried a little over a year later, which added a new mom, Eva, then a younger brother and sister, which they too had also experienced the loss of a father and husband 3 or 4 years earlier to that, like a sudden accident. So that time, look, I was 19, the only adult child, and then my step siblings were 11, 14, and my own sisters were 4, 9, and 15. So quite a spread of ages there also. They all needed a mother, and my stepmom Eva stepped in and cared for them wholeheartedly and with love. Dad had me, like as I started working, Dad had me working in most areas of the business. Like a production mill, the yard, delivery, doing payroll, doing billing, receiving and accounting. Like eventually I started doing purchasing right beside my dad. I had a desk right beside Dad for 15 to 20 years probably. I was hearing all his conversations, all his buying. I started being in meetings, all the management meetings and stuff with him. And over this time, the family, the employees, the community, it was just sort of the expected thing. And I accepted it, that I was the person who would have replaced Dad. I was the oldest son. I had interest in it. Like at the same time, looking back on it, like I realized that I never really consciously chose the path. Like I didn't realize that I had a choice. That's one of the things that Henry and Sally working with us has, self-awareness. You did have a choice. I do have a choice, and that's part of the story. At the same time, I didn't fight it. I liked it. I liked where I was. Was also a safe place for me to grow up, having trouble speaking too. So, and so I liked it. That was a path I went down, and yeah, so that's that part of the story.
And so as you could hear, there's a lot going on in the family, a lot of pain and loss and grief. And while the business is growing, one of our responsibilities as a family business advisor is to help families find whatever resources are necessary. So I recall, Robbie, in that first meeting when we met, when we experienced your stuttering, we suggested that you find someone, or that we help you find someone to communicate better as a leader. So we were very grateful to find a brain doctor, a neuropsychologist, Dr. Florence. And to your credit, and with great courage, you really stepped into some deep work that changed your life, which you can talk about a little later.
Yeah.
So Robbie, would you give us a brief history of the company and what it's like today?
Yeah. The Keiman family business started out as a sawmill in 1911. You think Sally's pulling a picture up here. The Keim family business started in 1911 by my great grandpa Moses J. Keim, and he would have been Amish. In that top left picture up there, and stacks lumber around it. It started with just 4 employees, and then 1934, Moses was joined by my grandpa Roman. Changed the name to MJ Keim and Son. There's not really a different picture. That picture 1911 was probably what it looked like roughly. And then in the 60s, my dad would have sort of started leading the company. Dad was born in 1940, and just saying, my dad's name is Bill, and so I'll probably intermix Dad and Bill, so I make sure you knew who I'm talking about there. Dad would have started working as a teenager in the business in 1953, and then into the 60s, he would have, like in his mid to late 20s, he would have started leading the company's small business, and still the same location, building there that you see in the upper left-hand corner. And then Dad was the main one responsible for growing the company from the mid 60s to what it is today. It's 45 to 50 years of leading the company, growing from the first lumber mill to the large campus that exists in Charm today, which you see a couple of the 74 there was the first real retail store where you see up on top of the hill. If you haven't been, or if you're here in Charm sometime, we can show it to you. The 1987 was a bigger 30,000 square foot store expansion. And then in the bottom right-hand corner is our current 50-acre campus. And I won't go into details of what we're talking about what that is, but currently, like I said, we have a 50-acre complex. We have a retail store, mill production facility, warehouse and distribution facilities, and then nearly 600 dedicated employees. And we've also, in the last couple of years, we've added a smaller hardware store that's maybe 15 minutes away from here, Mount Hope Hardware, to our family of companies.
And how about today? This is it today, right, Robbie?
Yeah, that is the front of that's the front of our, we call it the new store, but it's actually built in 2007, so it's not really new anymore, right? But that's the front of a retail store, and it's like 14 or 15 years old now, so.
So a key practice, and this is an amazing place. This is a destination place, so make sure you get there sometime. But a key part of our process when we engage with families is what we call our how we climb the mountain cycle. And that is, naming reality, what's really going on, and then accepting it, and then imagining and creating a new future, and then creating accountability structures. And reality has a way of changing, especially during transitions. So one of the complexities the Keims and some of you face is a blended family. Now, Karen created a simplified diagram of primarily family leadership in the businesses over the years. So Karen, could you share a little bit with us now?
Yeah. So I'll share with you, if you look at the genogram, Robbie would have talked about the generation number one was Mose, and he started the business back in 1911. He would have worked diligently in the business for a long time. Generation two then is Roman, Moses' son. And then generation three, you'll see that Bill and Carolyn are beside each other there, and they're both gone. And then we have generation three. So generation three, when Bill passed away, kind of talking about what the family looked like when he passed away. So he left his second wife behind, and that's Eva. She's kind of left of the middle of the screen there on generation three. And then below Bill and Carolyn, on the right side, you would see Robbie and myself. And then he would have three siblings that are biological siblings. Maria, that he talked about, who has the developmentally disabled. And then he has the younger sister, Heather, and a younger sister, Bethany. And then Eva had two children to her first marriage. And so Eric, you see him there. He was involved in the business. Robbie talked about that a little bit, and you'll hear more about him. And then his sister, Kim, who's married to Nick. So generation four, when Bill passed away, would have had 6 adult children, including Maria. And then there were 4 spouses. And then you'll see down on the bottom where generation 5 is, there's a total of 9 there. When Bill passed away, there would have just been 6. Our children are the oldest of all of the grandchildren. They, at the time of Bill's death, they would have ranged in age from 14 down to 7. And then there were 3 other grandchildren that were 5 and under, and then 3 of them were not born yet. So that's kind of the makeup of the family at the point when Bill would have passed away.
So with the death of Bill, you guys were in a deep family and business crisis. It affected all of your mountains. In fact, I would say all of your mountains were shaking. They were changing. They were trembling. And you engaged us in a strategic planning process for all the mountains, in the mountains and across the mountains. And so walk us through now the gaps that were left in each of the mountain due to Bill's death, and then what you did to address them, you know, what you did and kind of the results. So how about if you start with the family mountain? That's the biggest, that's the foundation.
Sure. So yes, there were definitely gaps left when Bill passed away. Like Robbie had shared, Eva had already lost a husband, so Bill was the loss of her second husband. So there was a gap for her. From a father perspective, there were no more biological kind parents. Robbie's mom and dad were both now gone, and his sisters, you know, they were missing both parents now. And it was also a second death of a father for Eric and Kim, Eva's children. So definitely a gap there. From a grandfather perspective, there was a loss of grandpa for our kids. They had known him before he ever got cancer. They had a relationship with him on some level that had been for 14 to 7 years, depending on which one of our children you're talking about. Really not sure, you know, I'm sure it impacted those who were under 5, the other 3 grandchildren that were alive at the point of his death. The youngest was just barely 1. So I'm sure they have memories of grandpa. They would have only had memories of him when he had cancer and things like that. So just not sure what the impact is there. And of course, then those who weren't born were not directly impacted by his death. Bill was really a bridge in the blended family, both with the business and with his older children specifically. Maria and Robbie both pretty much primarily knew him as a parent. Maria would have gotten to know Eva, and Eva certainly parented her on a significant level, given her disability. But Bethany was 3 when her mom passed, when her mom passed away. So she doesn't have a lot of recall of her mom, and so Eva was probably her primary parent. But anyhow, that bridge that Bill was for that blended family, just communication gaps and care gaps began to become evident. Especially the emotional relational piece for Eva and for Maria, that definitely there was a gap there. And as we experienced that, we I don't know that we put our finger on it necessarily, what all was going on, but we were definitely experiencing deep grief. There was trigger from past losses. There was miscommunication and misunderstanding and unspoken expectations and lots of tension. We could all feel those things, but we didn't know what to do with them. And then, of course, we had these unique complexities that come with blended families that we're still learning about, really. Part of also what happened then is we kind of, without even talking about it, natural care circles formed. And so what that looked like for Robbie and I is initially, Robbie was running the company. And so that was his heavy load, was running the company, and he had strong support from Eric in that. And I began to, as I shared earlier, kind of began recognizing that there was something going on we needed help with. And so I started focusing on that family and ownership confusion that we were experiencing and trying to understand it and understand what to do about it. And then my sister-in-law, Annie, who is Eric's wife and another first-round draft pick, she focused on Maria's care. There had been some trauma that Maria had been through, and she came around her, and Eric supported her in that. I did some support initially with that as well. Eventually, it transitioned that I took over primary responsibility for Maria and her care team. And currently today, Robbie and I now have the sole responsibility. So those things just kind of naturally happened. So what did we do as we were experiencing all of that? Well, we got into clinical counseling. There was a number of us. Maria was the first one, I believe, that got into clinical counseling, and quite a few of the rest of us followed over the years of having various times of being in clinical counseling to just help us process things and understand ourselves and the things we were experiencing. We engaged Delaware Valley, and we had lots of family councils, retreats, meetings. We formed task forces. They helped us think about 5-year visions, think about our personal dreams and our shared dreams, so much of that kind of stuff, and create growth plans. We engaged some disability professionals, a special needs financial planning, special needs planning organization that works with financial planning, as well as like care planning, residential planning. And we also engaged a lawyer that specializes in special needs as well. They helped us with getting government benefits, working on financial planning, setting up legal things that needed to be in place. And as Sally talked about earlier, we began working with Dr. Florence, the neuroscientist, neuropsychologist. In fact, so Robbie started working with her first in relationship to his stuttering, but that work has gone well beyond just the speech piece. We've learned through that that he has an extremely fast visual brain, and it turns out that there's more of us in the family. This is something that can be a trend. So our son is very much a fast visual brain as well, and he's done work with her, and we've seen incredible progress. And I've worked with her. I'm highly visual as well. Don't have the same fast piece, I don't think, that Robbie does, but that's it. Yeah, but definitely very visual. And also in my work with her, we recognized patterns, brain trauma patterns from the crisis, and she's helped me kind of work through those. And a lot of times it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and we just keep working forward, and it's really been helpful. And stepped into financial planning, really feel solid in that area with the support that we've had from that advisor. So, I can't speak for the whole family, but I'll speak for me and my family and Maria as to, what all that has done for us. Robbie and myself and the kids have grown in our ability to process our emotions, in being more self-aware. We're communicating healthier and with greater openness. And it's really cool. I'm seeing a lot of that same growth in Maria as we interact with her as her guardians. We have greater understanding of the family journey and of trauma and of grief and the complexity that comes with family business. We understand intellectual disability like we never did before. We understand more about ownership and stewardship and blended families and each other and ourselves. So like just really a lot of growth. And that's just some of the results. It's all a work in progress. But the most rewarding things for me right now, just speak for myself, as Maria's guardian, it's really cool to be seeing her safe and supported and in a setting where she's growing and she's learning what we're learning, what appropriate independence looks like for her as we search for where she will be long-term and what setting she'll be in. We're also getting very close to having long-term financial planning and legal planning in place for her, which should take care of her should something even happen to Robbie or I or any other family member, working at getting those things in place. As a parent, our kids are young adults now. Our youngest is a freshman, our oldest is a junior in college, and our middle child is a senior in high school. So it's just really exciting to see them understanding themselves better and how their brains work and how they're wired and what they love. And they understand what they have to offer in a way that I'm not sure I did when I was their age. And they have a desire to contribute it where they can. So that's really, really cool. As a wife, Robbie and I are a team like we never have been before. We are learning to have fun together again as spouses. We are parenting together in a way that we never did before. We're even doing housework together. Robbie even calls himself my house spouse, and I love it. We are working together in the ownership. We are a team with Maria's guardianship. We're just really working peer-to-peer in a way that, like I said, we never have before. We're no longer being crushed by crisis, but we're having fun together in the things that we're doing. And as an individual, I'm definitely healing and growing, still a journey, but my true self is more fully emerging. And every day I get to bring all of who I am to Keim. I'm the only family member employed at Keim at this point. And I get to make the contribution that only I can make as a designer and a visionary and a family member. Many days my family calls me and texts me and has to remind me to come home from work. So that's kind of the family mountain and where we started and where we are now.
And as you heard that, thank you, Karen. As you heard, you could hear the crossover. So we're talking about the family mountain, but we're talking about all the advisors that are being invited in and working together. I mean, Henry and I have learned so much as well from Dr. Florence and from Jennifer and from Mary and other advisors that we invited in to help the family, which helps the business and across. So thank you. Henry, any comments you want to offer before we go into the business? And maybe you're not with us. I can't hear you. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to the business. And I'll bring up the slide.
Okay, so in the business at the time of Dad's death, he would have died in 2014. It was coming up on almost 7 years here. And when Dad left, there was really he had his cancer first come in 2009, 2010, and then he did his round of treatments. It was gone for a couple of years and came back, and then for 2013 or so to 2014, it sort of went on a slow downhill trend. So it wasn't a surprise that he passed away. So it wasn't a shock that he was going to pass away. Because when he left, there really wasn't a huge gap there. Things were fairly, when I say steady, I mean the sole owner and president for 45, 50 years, whoever that is, and however much preparation is done, there's always a certain level of grief of him just physically not being there anymore. So, but besides that, we were fairly stable. Like I was president, and my brother Eric was vice president. We had our top management team was called the leadership team, which I had started back in 2010. And like I said, the company had to a certain point had anticipated or had grieved Dad to a certain point prior to that, because they knew what was coming. Not that that made it easy, but it just was. Several years prior, we had celebrated our 100th anniversary. And also a couple of years prior to that, we had finished building our big retail store, which was sort of Dad's, I don't know, we want to say crowning achievement, but that was sort of his last big thing that he did. And so the company itself was pretty strong. Sales and profits were growing. Our financial position had never been stronger. So basically the ship wasn't sinking. Like it was going forward at a pretty good rate of speed, actually. So that was really nice. The business over the last number of years had its own head of steam up from a lot of the work that we had been doing prior to Dad's death. We engaged Henry and Sally year and a half after Dad's death. After Karen found them, we engaged them. Some of the ways that we engaged them were with me and Eric being president, or me being president and Eric being vice president. We stepped into pretty intensive weekly executive coaching with Henry and Sally. Those of you who have interacted with Henry know that things can be pretty intensive with him. I say that with a smile, but they were pretty, like I was working with Dr. Florence at the same time. So it was a fairly like intensive load for me. But I'm still breathing, so it's all good, right? We upgraded our top team. I'll talk about that a little bit later. As Henry and Sally worked with me, okay, what needs done here? We did some departmental reviews and stuff, and continued to connect with other advisors for doing some of these departmental diagnostics, accounting, different things. Probably the biggest overall impact, when you look back at the whole last 5 or 6 years, was them encouraging me and Eric to consider what our own dreams were. I think I mentioned that one of the things looking back now is that I did have a choice in what I was doing, which I exercised, and been asking the question, what is best for yourself personally, for your family, for the business, just asking those questions and really allowing yourself to answer those questions honestly. That resulted in me resigning from being president. Back in February 2019, I would have resigned from the president's position. 6 months later, our first non-family president was hired. A few months after that, our first non-family president, Jim Smucker, was hired. And he started that summer, which is really quick turnaround. It was totally God's blessing that we found Jim. And then Eric served as the interim president during that time, and then later that year, he also stepped down. So like Karen said, she's the only family member working day to day in the business right now. So right now, L'Chaim is flourishing. We're having our best years ever. The construction and COVID, everything, we never imagined we'd be here when COVID first started. We didn't know what was going to happen. So we're very, very blessed to be where we're at. And both Eric and I are stepping away from the business, exploring, what our own paths look like going forward. Karen shared a little bit personally, a few points. What does that mean for me personally, since I was able to step away 2.5 years ago? Again, like Karen said, deeper relationships with Karen and my kids, being a house spouse, like among other things. It just my experience with all of my kids, especially my youngest son, Cade. He was 12 when I resigned, and I really took advantage of that time to spend time with him that I didn't have the energy or mental capacity to spend with him. And it was perfect timing. I'm also applying my skills and my knowledge for the first time I have a job outside of Keim. It was the first paying job that I've had outside of the Keim family, Keim Lumber, my whole life. Working a couple days a week for a friend's small business, and it's very rewarding. I used to think that I had a lot of knowledge within the company here, and I knew a lot of things, but I never valued my skill level, my knowledge level outside of that. And so I'm actually experiencing, I can actually add value to other places outside of Keim. Then I'm also working, like I've started just in like the last month or two, I've started coming in here to Keim a day or two a week, spending time with Karen in her office. She gives me the lifetime table to work at. And we work on governance type work, and I really do enjoy being here. I enjoy the employees. I know a lot of the employees, and just being a physical presence here has been very, very enjoyable. And then also continuing meeting with Dr. Florence once in a while, and continuing exploration as to what the next few years and long term looks like. So.
And as you said, you are still working, even though you are not employed. There is a lot of work that you're doing, Robbie.
Yeah.
Henry, I just want to check. Can we hear you? We cannot hear you. Are you on mute? Okay. Okay. So yeah, Robbie, you mentioned there were a number of things as you went along, in the business you discovered, and we talked together about, let's maybe review some of the like accounting, and let's review your the compensation. And so we
Sure.
engage in a process of really looking at other advisors. Is that right?
Yeah, one of the things that we worked on was there were a number. The company had grown at a fairly substantial rate over the last 10 or 20 years prior to Dad's passing, and the areas of sales, the sort of the operations piece of it, the production was more Dad's focus. And that's where a lot of the physical growth happened. Some of the infrastructure, like accounting, finance, technology, HR, hadn't grown at the rate matching the company's growth in sales and in operations. And so we really they were just underpowered. No other way to describe it. And so they weren't serving the company. For continued growth, we needed to focus on those areas. So we had, we engaged several third-party advisors, and we did a finance and accounting. These are more departmental reviews. We had a finance and accounting. We had Crasher Miller. I think Mario is like listening in. Finance and accounting, Mario came in and met with the department and did these departmental reviews were a little bit like, like sort of, like Henry told me one time, opening your kimono up, sort of, hey, look at it, tell us what you see. And it was a neutral, sort of a, benchmarking like exercise. What do you see? What do you recommend for us to move forward and to keep growing? Some of the things they pointed out in the financial and accounting piece of it was the inventory control. One of our biggest asset is the inventory. Dad was one who you got to have it to sell it. That worked for a long time, and just still works, but that was one of the things that we didn't have a whole lot of controls that way. The internal processes, we weren't, the internal process we had was very much a manual. It come from a manual system like years before, and so there wasn't your normal checks and balances that a lot of companies our size would have. And financial reporting, we just hired our first controller, CFO, a couple years before that, and so that was being developed. It come from a long way back, and it was still being developed. That was a financial accounting piece. We also did a technology and IT department review. We were in the midst of knowing that we needed a new ERP system. So we also work with Chrysler Miller in this, their technology department with Sasan. And so they eventually helped us with the ERP search, which we're going live in about 4 months with that. That highlighted hardware upgrades, cybersecurity upgrades, a number of things, and that's an area that that's been improved a lot over the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of hard work, a lot of dollars being poured into that, because I think we all know technology is, without a strong tech department, you're not going to go very far these days. And then the other part was the HR part. Another advisor connected with that, the Delaware Valley connected us with Proxys. The human resources piece of it was another area that was not had not grown. With we had 400 employees back then, and we had one or two people in HR. So just the department itself, there wasn't a whole lot of need. We didn't have a lot of like drug abuse and some of the normal things you have, but there was still a lot of things that just needed work and that could be improved and stuff. So some of the things there, one of the major things we did was a compensation study. This area has a very low unemployment rate. Like it's usually between 2 and 3%, like around here. And so wages are pretty big and benefits are a pretty big deal. So we did a lot of benchmarking that way, working with Proxys, and just in general, strengthening the department. That's still a work in progress. So
I just give Robbie a lot of credit for how he just was willing to, let's just take a fresh look at everything. I mean, there's normal cleanup work, as Robbie said, with the transition, but then to see things and to invite outside eyes on. So you have really strengthened the infrastructure. I think you had mentioned earlier about the leadership team. There's been a lot of work there. So a lot of growth in the mountain, in the Blue Mountain. Anything else you wanted to say about that?
I think a lot of those things are just, I think, normal, like looking back on it, just normal generational leadership change, like from Dad Bill to me, to the next generation. We also reformed the our top cabinet leadership team. We changed the size of it in about half to like 6 people. We reformed it to the executive team, a smaller team. We also, Henry and Sally helped me redefine what the position of president was. Dad would have done purchasing, bought lumber. He bought a lot of the outside stuff, the lumber and all those things, which I have been doing too at that point. He managed finances, worked with pricing, had his hands in mostly everything day to day. He had his hands in. Didn't do a lot of team building, a lot of those things. And so Henry and Sally helped me redefine what the position of president was. Okay, what does the company need at this size? And so really totally reshaped the president's position. So then these are all changes that were taking place from 2010 on until after Dad's death, and it was just a long series of changes. And then with the executive team change, we also redefined. We put a lot of success profiles or job descriptions, different names like in place and define the roles. There wasn't much of that done prior to that. That also helped shape a lot of how me and Eric work together. Like after Dad passed away, his role became even more important in making a lot of the generational changes that needed to happen. And just say a little bit about Dr. Florence. Henry and Sally found Dr. Florence, like neuroscientist, therapist. I'm not sure, not therapist, but we call her brain doctor. And she would have helped me. I would have started since I was 4 years old, and didn't do a lot of speaking. Didn't do speaking in front of groups. That just wasn't something that I did. She started working with me on my speaking, connected with Fast Visual Brain. And if you want to ask me more questions about that later, you can communicate with me directly. But it got me to the point over a couple of years where I was able to speak in front of hundreds of people. Still don't choose to do it. Still don't enjoy it, but I can do it. And then she also, over the last couple of years, I've continued working with her, not on speech so much anymore, but just on how my brain functions. And she's helped me improve my speaking, my self-awareness, my self-confidence, and flexibility with change. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Flexibility with change. And that's just a continuing, I'm a much different person than I was 5 years ago. So, yeah.
It's awesome. So much work, Robbie. You've done so much work. And now I'd like to shift to more work that you and Karen have been doing on the Gold Mountain. So this is often an invisible mountain, and we don't, we know certain things about shareholders. There's been a lot of change in the Keim shareholders. So let's move into the Gold Mountain.
So yeah, with the Gold Mountain, again, going back to Bill's death and what kind of gaps might have that left. At the point when he would have passed away, the shareholders would have, or the G4 family members that were that had become shareholders were ranging in age from 24 years old to 39. So Robbie was 39 and his youngest sister was 24. And the shares had at his death, functionally, he had still been operating as the controlling owner, even though silently the shares had been passed on to the fourth generation 2 years earlier. But that was more just like a signing of papers and not a lot of explanation. And there had been very little education about ownership done with G4. So there was really a lot of varying levels of understanding. Those involved in business currently at their ages had somewhat of an understanding of what maybe that meant, but there were some that had very, very little because they were just graduating or not really involved in business leadership. So they're really varying understandings. And there was nothing in place specifically that directed G4 on how that group of shareholders was to work together after Bill passed away. So we were functionally going from one owner to 5 owners. And I don't think any of us had any idea what that kind of a shift looked like or what it was going to mean for us, neither G3 or G4. And as Robbie's already shared with you, he was very busy in the day-to-day running of the company. And so this is again where my role in looking for advisors to come help us with this piece, the complexity really started coming kind of out of this piece. And the confusion and the lack of clarity, lack of understanding, the misunderstandings, the differing expectations, it really just made everything ripe for conflict. That's kind of what came out of what was there. What was set up was not bad, but there was just a lack of understanding about it. And then that was all on top of the deep grief from the death and the prior deaths and the blended family system. So a lot going on there. So when we brought Delaware Valley in, like I had said earlier, like one of the things they started doing right away in that first meeting was to normalize what we were experiencing. And as we continued meeting with them, they did a lot of education with us on, what does it mean to be a shareholder? And really kind of talking about the importance of shareholders being competent, committed, and aligned. So they really kind of encouraged us and gave us exercises to do that helped us explore, like, what is my dream? What is Karen's dream? What is Robbie's dream? And so we did it together as an entire G4 group, including spouses. And we kind of explored our individual dreams, as well as what would a shared dream, what does my shared dream in this look like if I have a dream for this company and this family business. And through that, it's been a lot of processing, and we revisited writing about those dreams more than just once. In fact, Robbie and I are currently still working on writing, our dream now that we're at a different place in the ownership. But where that brought us to as a shareholder group, so there were 5 shareholders. Maria, the sister with disabilities that we're guardian of, she is not one of the shareholders. So it's just the 5 siblings that were the shareholders. And out of that, everybody has been able to come to a point of clarity that has led to 3 redemptions and 1 sibling being a passive shareholder, and then Robbie continuing on as an active shareholder. Together, he and I are working on this. We just continue to be committed to the long term of the company in doing whatever shareholder work is necessary for the company to continue on for a lot more years. So currently we're working on a lot of foundational governance work. There really wasn't governance in place, so we're working on a lot of that. We're really starting from a very blank slate, and we're preparing it for the future, for the next generations. We're writing a lot of policies and procedures. We're updating legal documents. We're educating the company about family business. And there's just a lot more to be done beyond that yet too, in thinking about what does a formalized board look like and different things like that. There's lots of things, but right now we're biting off what is the right next step. That's a phrase Robbie has been using through this whole journey, especially more recently. Like, we just need to focus on the right next step, and that has been a really good guiding principle. And we're being more intentional with G5. We're being more intentional with our kids. Over the time of the confusion and complexity with the transition between generation 3 and 4, they really, it was wearing on our family and on the whole family system. And they felt that, and they knew that. And so they didn't really have as much interest in even thinking being part of the company or whatever, and we're really more interested in exploring other ideas. And since some of this clarity has come on the shareholder mountain, their energy for the business and about the business and their paths for the future, it's just risen. We have a lot of really neat conversations with them about the business, and also are reinforcing very much that you don't have an automatic path into the business. Like, you find your dream. And so they've used a career coach that Henry and Sally hooked us up with, that both Robbie and I have used, that other family members have used, but all of our kids, except for our son, he hasn't quite gotten there yet, but have worked with a career coach. So they've learned more about themselves through that. And our oldest daughter in college, she's right now pursuing a double major in music and economics. So she's done some job shadowing at the company, and that's been really interesting, because then she actually wrote up a proposal for what job shadowing for family members could look like. And at our last board meeting, she presented it there. And our other 2 kids actually visited as guests at the board meeting for a short period of time. So just beginning to have more conversations with them and hoping to set the stage of their understanding to be one that's more than what G4 had going into the whole ownership thing, if that is in fact the path they end up being on.
So this shareholder stuff is serious stuff. being a shareholder, and we really try to get this word out so much because there's so many slippery slopes in family business. You know, family members can go like kind of right into the business. And sometimes families make children shareholders as a way to transfer wealth. Now, there are ways to do, creative ways to do all of these things you want to accomplish. But sometimes we set up business marriages unintentionally. And so there's just a lot of complexity. And I think you guys have really been navigating a lot of muck and coming out.
And one of the things I would add is our oldest, at one point, we always required that they work somewhere else before they even have the chance to try and work even a summer job at the company. And there was one summer after our oldest had in fact done that. And she asked if it would be okay if she could apply at Keim since she had already worked a previous job. And we said, you can, but then we were really grateful for the manager who approached Robbie and then came back, who approached him and said, what about this? And Robbie said, treat her like you would anybody else that comes in to apply for that job. And he turned her down. And we were actually very grateful that she was the first Keim family member to be turned down for employment because she wasn't getting any preferential treatment for being a Keim. And to this point, neither of our other two kids have worked at the company. Have found things during the summer to do elsewhere too. So it's not just a free ticket into the company to be having the name Keim.
Yes, we are not an employment agency, right? A family employment agency. Henry, just checking, can we hear you?
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yeah.
we can.
Ooh.
Wonderful. Whatever you did.
Well, I want to comment a little bit about Bill, Generation 3, sole owner. I never met Bill, but he was an exceptional guy who had a lot of business savvy, but maybe even more importantly, he was deeply trusted by all the employees. He was not a management genius. I doubt if he read one management book, but he was really smart about buying material, buying stuff. And he had a spirit about him of collaboration, but had very few management processes that were in place. So when Robbie came along, he was in I think a really tough spot because he really had a very serious stuttering condition, which they had kind of given up on. And one of the things that is always important to do in our life is to change what we can and accept what we can't. Well, the family had, I think, kind of had decided back when you were young, Robbie, that we really couldn't do anything about it. Well, when we met Robbie, we said, well, maybe we can do something, and we're not going to accept that we can't change this. And so we, through our own research, we came up with this magnificent person who might be of some values to other companies, which opened up a whole range of new things for Sally and I in terms of how our brain functions. We're learning a lot more about neuroscience and how our brain works and how it impacts our daily life. But Robbie just stepped into this to learn and to really, you see how he's speaking today. I mean, to me, it's amazing. And secondly, Bill, he was a curious guy and Robbie's a curious guy. And when we got involved with Robbie, he wanted to learn all this stuff. He had no formal training in management. But he was eager to learn throughout the whole process. And if you're eager to learn and smart, and Robbie's very smart, you can do a lot of things. And the thing that I think is very important in terms of the culture of this company is that even though Robbie couldn't talk very well, didn't speak at meetings, actually Eric did the speaking on his behalf, people deeply trusted Robbie. So one of the fundamental foundations of management was there in spades. And that continued and continues today, that as the principal shareholder along with Karen. So family businesses have remarkable resilience and invent things and do things that I would never think of. So it's been a privilege for me to work with Robbie and Karen and the whole family. I mean, there's been some pretty painful stuff. I mean, this is all normal. Any family business, speaking the truth to each other is really hard. Bill didn't do a very good job of ownership transfer. Actually, he made everybody a shareholder, and then they had to decide afterwards whether they were going to redeem or not. We would prefer it the other way. Like, let everybody who wants to be a shareholder step up and be declared competent, aligned, and committed. But this went the other way. And you know what? Bill was right. He trusted the family to figure it out. And they have figured it out. And this is not a perfect story. This is a messy story. But I think everybody is on the way to more clarity, and the family still has significant work to do. But families need good leadership, and you're talking to them this morning. Robbie and Karen have been excellent leaders.
Well, and we talked about, let's see, 3 of the mountains. Let's talk a little bit more about now the advisor mountain and the board mountain. Robbie, earlier you said Bill had 2 advisors, right? So talk a little bit about advisor mountain.
Yeah, one thing I might hear sort of combine both the advisor mountain and the board mountain, because at the time of his death, there wasn't, there basically didn't, the board mountain didn't exist basically. So I'll sort of talk about both together here. So we sort of joke when, like, there wasn't a formal board when Dad was still living. So he'd have his board meetings in the shower. He decided to build a store. It wasn't quite that easy, but he didn't have a formal group of people around him. Now he would have done, if you're going to talk about an informal board, my biological mom, Carolyn, before she passed away, and then Eva, my stepmom, would have been his informal board, at home in the house, and him and I did a lot of talking together. So there was a lot of family conversations taking place at the same time. And then as far as advisors go, he had an accountant and lawyer that he'd worked with for years, at the time of his death. So there was when Dad was gone, we realized our general need for advisors, this is in after communication with Henry and Sally, learning what was normal stuff, we realized our general need for advisors outside of our own family, because of all the complex layers, the blended family, the trauma, the grief, and it helped us over the time to understand our need for advisors, and also the need for a functioning board, which were just, as far as the board goes, we are, back up a little bit. Like I talked about, the different departmental reviews and stuff, working with Proxys and Chrysler Miller, we added, and upgraded our advisors in various areas, and formed over the last couple of years, as we worked through making the different shareholders made choices, and we worked through our dreams, all this stuff. We formed a PAC, with what Henry and Sally call a PAC, Professional Advisory Council, which is, herding the cats basically. Hopefully you advisors out there don't mind being called cats, but so went from a PAC, that's evolved to where it's at currently. We have an official board in place. It's more of like an advisory board. It's me and Karen, Henry and Sally, and Mario, then our attorney from like locally here, Max, and then Jim Smucker, our president. And see, they're on the board mountain. and we're also currently continuing to meet as PAC when it's needed and stuff. So Karen and I are a part of all these groups, and we're working with these, and we continue, like Karen said, with everything. This is all a work in progress. We're living into it, and it's crazy to think where we're at compared to a couple years ago. So.
And I'd actually like Henry, since you couldn't participate in the beginning, I had wanted you to talk about where we kind of learned about this, what we call PAC, Professional Advisory Council, or advisory teams, that gray mountain. Talk a little bit about how we first learned about that, how effective an advisory team can be, and maybe a bridge to becoming.
Well, I think we often fail to understand that each of these mountains requires a team. Right? You know, you have a management team and the whole structure, shareholder team, family is a team, really. So the first thing in really developing a strong shareholder mountain is to have the right people. Last night, if you watched the Phillies game, Bryce Harper is one of the right people, but he's only one of them. And so you need all good players. But after you have good advisors, you have to have find a way to create a team out of them. I have a colleague who wrote an article a number of years ago, and he talked, it was entitled "Learning to Herd Cats, Working with Family Business Advisors." And the point he was making is that in many family business situations, the family or the CEO works with each advisor separately. Work with your accountant, your attorney, your family business advisor, and all the other advisors. I mean, you heard a little bit of the many different advisors. Well, that takes a little bit of coordination, or maybe a lot of coordination. And so about 10 or 12 years ago, I was working with Dave Hollinger at Four Seasons Produce in Lancaster County, and he was in the process of forming many new structures for his family firm. And he said to me one day, "Why don't we get these guys together and you chair the group, and we'll just once a year we'll talk about how everything is going on in the company from the perspective of the advisor, but also to update them, all the advisors, on strategically where he saw the family business going." And so I was surprised and delighted with how eager all the advisors were to do this. They didn't really want to work in silos. Now, frankly, I think some advisors do. But what we found in that situation, his advisors and the advisors on our sponsor team, these are people who are very collaborative. And that's what you need in a team, because no one of us is smart as all of us, as Sally said earlier. So we think that this is a very important part of not only transition planning, because this is our professional advisory council is something that we recommend, particularly when you're going through ownership changes. But throughout the whole history of the company, having outside perspectives, whether it's advisors or outside board members. Now here at Keim, they're not quite ready for outside directors. Probably next year they will be ready. In the meanwhile, I'm chairing the PAC group, and I'm also chairing the board at the moment. But it's a transitional process. And eventually Robbie and Karen are going to be selecting, no kidding, outside directors who will give really good long-term support. Now, the other advisors' roles will continue, but not as board members. So we want to keep that. We want to move back to clarity between the various mountains.
And I want to say,
go ahead, Karen.
I want to say too how valuable this concept of PAC, Professional Advisory Council, has been in the special needs planning. We essentially have our own PAC group that has allowed us to do essentially the same thing in preparing for Maria. I've interacted through the process of being Maria's guardian and primary care person with a lot of families who it's the parent taking care of the adult child with disabilities, and they are pretty alone. And we have a great team around us that really makes it so much more that we can continue on thriving in our lives as we have the support that we need as we help her, and then she can thrive also. So that's just been another application. So if there's any of you out there with the special needs component, that's something that's been really good for us.
Well, I would note that Karen has been the chairperson of that group, which started as a task force, and then evolved into more of a very well-defined group that had clear outcomes. They decide who's doing what, and one of the advisors is in Illinois, and the others are in Ohio. So you don't have to limit your advisors to your particular area. Somebody who will make sure that there's an agenda set out, that there are action steps written, that kind of keeps the whole group together. This is not this is an important function that someone needs to give leadership to. So in many ways, we're modeling how the family can itself take over a lot of the leadership responsibilities. And we can never predict what's going to be needed. In this family, there were a lot of things that needed to be tended to because of Bill's untimely death. Like me and maybe you, Bill didn't think he was going to die. And he was what, 75? Right? And I'm 75 now, and I don't plan to die soon, but you know, it could happen tomorrow. And so we need planning ahead. And that was not Bill's strength. Bill's strength was building the company with ambition, clarity and energy and curiosity. And these guys are continuing it. So I think this company has a great future.
I'd also just like to invite you, Karen, to mention, what is Maria doing now? One of the things that we often help families do is to name reality, as we talked. And I think when we first came in 6 years ago, I don't believe you were using the words that she had a disability. So we had to go through all the disability things. But just, you know, in a few seconds here, tell us what Maria is doing.
So yeah, Sally's right. She did not use the word disability. And she has learned to begin using the word disability, and it's been through a process of applying for college. She is currently in her 3rd year at a 3-year program at a college that's specific for people with intellectual disabilities. And it was in the process of preparing for that and applying for that she, with the help of her counselor, began to use the word disability. And she's really, it's always a work in progress, but she is in a horticulture program, and she has an emotional support dog, and she is learning to understand more. Her self-awareness has grown so much that she understands much more when her emotions are rising, and they still rise and fall a lot, but she recognizes when it's happening. She didn't used to recognize it and didn't have tools for that. So she's managing herself much better and learning where she needs support, and also we're seeing where her capabilities are, and that's really exciting. So yeah, she will graduate next spring from this college, and we are looking towards supported residential living beyond that.
Well, just amazing. And I would just like to thank both you, Robbie and Karen, for sharing and being so open, sharing the hope and a possible path forward. Every family takes their own path, but there's lots out there to gain. And also, Karen, you stepped into my family governance peer group. I think you're not only learning, but you're contributing a lot to what you're learning, because you're actually redoing a lot of things in the company. So we also, for anyone who's interested, we do have a handout, a resource on advisory teams, or PAC as we call that. If you'd like, just reach out and we can give that to you. You can access this program in probably by tomorrow. And I wanted to share our next event, which will be on October 20. Oh, we didn't get to this. We'll come back to this. It'll be on October 21. Awesome Conversations, Women Transitioning to CEOs in Multi-Generational Family Business. Many of you know Heather Chandler. She's the G3 CEO at Seal Strip. You'll get to know Beth and Carla. And I think as a lovely closing, this is Karen or Robbie. Do you want to just say a word about this before we close?
So I'm on the left, of course. I'm the with my hands in my pockets, and we don't go by the age. Doesn't relate to the size. So my son Cade is the youngest, 14. He's taller than I am, which isn't saying much, but he's still taller than I am. Then our middle daughter Maddie is in the green sweater there, which Cade makes note of the height difference fairly often there between him and her. Then our oldest daughter Kaylee's the one in college. She's in the white shirt, and then Karen's on the right in the jean jacket. So we're having a lot of fun with them right now. So yeah.
And they are a delightful bunch. So thank you again, Robbie and Karen. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Henry. Please reach out if we can be of any help, and best for your day. Thank you.